Live from the New Scientist Labs, it's Janine Young with Wammo on Kiwi.
From the pages of New Scientist magazine, Janine Young joins us in New Scientist Labs in Melbourne City. Good morning, Janine.
Good morning, Wammo.
First topic today should worry anyone who's planning on drinker driving, especially in the States.
Yeah, that's right. They've brought in a thing called a Secure Continuous Remote Alcohol Monitor, a SCRAM. Everybody loves an acronym. And what this does is able to measure the alcohol that's coming out of your skin. When you actually drink, you do have some of it coming out your skin as well as being excreted out through your urine and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And what this device does is that once an hour, because this is up against the skin, it fires a soft jet of air at the skin, and that vaporizes any alcohol present, and it measures its concentration. So they're claiming this is a way to be able to work out if anyone who has been pulled over for drink driving, for example, or has been told don't drink, you're not able to, that this is a way of detecting when they do drink. It can take about an hour for the alcohol to start coming out of your skin after you start, but they claim that there's a particular rate at which it is released, and therefore they can pick up within a relatively short period of time. If you're within range of the modem that's in your home, the information is beamed back to the company that make this, alcohol monitoring systems, and if there's an unusual result, that's then the relevant official is notified, and then they, I imagine, come and have a bit of a word with you.
They're going to send around the alcohol police.
Yeah, there's a few possible issues with this. False positives is I think the most obvious, because
if
there
you've got
has been
a strong perfume.
Well, that's the thing, because this actually picks up the pair of oxygen and hydrogen atoms called a hydroxyl group, and that's characteristic of all alcohols. So that means that it has difficulty discriminating between ethanol, which is alcohol that we know is the stuff we drink, and other forms of alcohol such as cleaning fluids, perfume, hell, methanol. If you're cleaning something and you get some metho on yourself, well, you know, that still counts. And there was a case in 2006 of a woman who was, well, she was a part-time model, and she was actually doing a modelling job, and eventually got pulled into court because the readings came up on this thing saying that she had in fact been drinking. They think what it probably was, because she was in a hair salon, she'd been pripped and preened and shampooed and gelled, conditioned within an inch of her life, no doubt, and because there was a hairdryer involved, what they think happened is that some of these volatile compounds had gotten down in between her skin and this measuring device and given a false positive.
So are these people who are actually banned from drinking, full stop?
Yeah, they, as it says at the beginning of the article, for years they were focusing on saying, if you drink and drive, we'll stop you driving.
Yeah.
But that didn't get to the heart of the issue. They've now developed a way to stop you drinking. And that's what they're saying this is all about. That there have been some very, very good results in places like South Dakota. There's not much evidence to be able to work out what's going on here, but the small amount there is does suggest that that device is in fact helping to reduce drinking and therefore, by extension, alcohol-related crimes. South Dakota was using a trial in 2005 under which judges were able to order offenders or even people who were on bail to not drink or take drugs, and they were using the SCRAM device as well as things like urine and blood tests. Now, you can't work out which one was down to the SCRAM and which one was down to other types of testing, but they did say that alcohol-related accidents and injuries have fallen by 43% over the last 3 years. So that's a good result. You know, there's people not being harmed, people not ending up in jail. But there's questions over people's civil liberties here, and there are times that it appears that the Americans are less concerned about that kind of thing than they are in our countries.
So this will be great if somewhere in the middle they can find a balance, really, isn't it?
And that's ultimately, I think, I mean, there's never any black or white in what we talk about each week.
No.
When you start talking about ethics and civil liberties and all that sort of thing, you need to start thinking about how wrong is too wrong, and
Yes.
and when do you need to stop and say, well, actually, this is for the greater good, and even though one person's rights are being impinged a little bit, is that okay? You know, where do you draw the line? And I'm not sure there's a good answer, but the fact that you actually have rates of alcohol-related crime falling by nearly half, you know, that's worth considering.
Janine, can you answer this question for me, please?
I will try.
Why has same-sex sexual behaviour evolved when it seems to run counter to evolutionary principles?
That's actually not a very easy question to answer, but thank you for asking anyway.
It's all right.
There's, as you say, there's quite a lot of same-sex sexual behaviour happening in the animal kingdom. I think most people would be aware of the Humboldt penguins at a zoo in Germany that adopted an egg, hatched it and reared the chick together. And despite zookeepers' best attempts to separate them and show them to females, they refused.
Yeah.
They stayed together.
Yeah.
There was a huge uproar at the time about this being gay penguins and, oh, this is not natural. Actually, it is. It happens quite frequently. But it's really important to think about this issue, if you want to call it that. It's not an issue, clearly, for the animals, in the fact that they don't have social, moral, political, any kind of implications because, well, they're animals.
Yeah, you
They're
completely
not
rule.
imbued with these sorts of things.
That's right. You can rule any of that out, right?
Exactly. So there's been a couple of scientists that have been looking at this, and they've been trying to work out why this would happen. Because you would think that from an evolutionary point of view, if you're wasting your time spending your good reproductive years with someone of the same sex, then you're actually wasting your time, you're wasting your energy, and you're not propagating your genes, because that's theoretically what evolution is all about. They think that there are a number of things, a number of reasons this might happen. They have adaptive behaviours, which are kind of behavioural sorts of things. It can be the forming and maintenance of bonds, like happens in dolphins. And, you know, a male mounting a male doesn't mean they're necessarily there to actually try and reproduce. In some cases, it's to reduce tension and prevent conflict. It's a way of making sure that the dominant male stays dominant. It's an incredibly aggressive move when you think about it. It can be social bonding, as I said.
I think that happens in jails, doesn't it?
Well, that's another effect that it's called the prison effect, and it also happens in damsel flies. When there's no other females around, they resort to mounting one another, and it's called the prison effect for a very good reason. So the number of the sorts of survival of individuals and behavioural sorts of things that come out of that. But then there's other possible non-adaptive ones, which means that, you know, it can be mistaken identity. There's some toads, for example, that actually have to persuade, shall we say, their females to mate with them. Maybe the females realise just how ugly the toads are and say no, because the males have to physically squeeze the eggs out of them in order to fertilise them. It's a vice-like grip. And sometimes the males get it a bit wrong and they end up squeezing a male. But what's interesting out of this is there's a specific little chirping type sound that has developed for whatever reason, and they're not 100% why, but if this is something that's developed in response purely to this action, then that suggests that this same-sex behaviour has specifically generated behaviour, and that's what they're looking at.
What about for humans? Are there any benefits to homosexual behaviour to humans?
There can. Now, homosexual behaviour in humans, as we said, is a little bit different to animals because there's a whole range of social and other things that go with it. Animals don't develop a sense of sexuality. They don't think like we do. But in terms of humans, it can be that how can I put it? In some cases, you can actually have something like a gene that is in two males. When that gets reproduced, because obviously they're still generally fertile and you can have surrogacy and there's a number of ways to still have children, there's a gene that promotes homosexuality when it's in two males, but you put it into a female and it actually increases their reproductive success. Now, this is a little quirk that they've discovered over the years because a lot of people are very interested in how homosexuality came about. But it appears that it actually benefits the daughters of a gay man, as opposed to actually benefiting the male, because it actually makes him gay. And we know that actually, although being homosexual is what it is, it does have political ramifications, and it makes people's lives just a bit more difficult than it is if you're straight, 2.3 children and white picket fence.
Interesting.
It really is.
Yeah.
This one is a really odd one to get your head around, because it's saying in some cases there are evolutionary pressures that can be brought to bear, but in some cases there's no real explanation for it, because there are some types of bighorn sheep that will routinely mount one another. Males will routinely mount each other season after season. There's a group of Oahan Laysan albatross. They're females. More than a third of those breeding populations are nesting pairs of females. So some of them will stay faithful over several years. And they think that this has